Hello and a huge warm welcome. My name is Lorraine Davies and I am the host of this summit, The Expansion, Unleash Your Infinite Potential and Reclaim the Power Within. I am so delighted to welcome our guest speaker today, the fabulous Devorah. I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up about who she is and what she does before we get into the juicy stuff. But Devorah has been a master storyteller for over 30 years. Today, she's also an intuitive coach and helps writers, creative, and entrepreneurs to find the clarity and confidence to tell their deep, authentic story, to live their purpose and transform their lives. Her In Story group takes people on a journey to find and manifest their soul's calling and bring their story, mission, and message out into the world. Devorah has clients all over the world, following their calling, writing books and building businesses based on the deep work that accesses their inner story and the power to integrate and use all parts of ourselves. Oh my goodness, it is such a pleasure to have you with me today, Devorah. Hello, and thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, my favorite subject, right?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. So before we get into all the juiciness of what you do and how you serve in the world, I would love to know a little bit about your background and how you got into doing what you do now.
So, of course, what I'm going to have to do, I'm going to have to tell you a story.
Yeah.
So a long time ago in a faraway land, no, not just kidding. Was kind of a long time ago in a faraway land, but when I was 18, I was working as an assistant in a preschool. And honestly, from when I was a little girl, I used to say, I want to be a preschool, I called it a nursery school teacher back then. Like I knew I wanted to do something with kids, and I was always very creative. I loved stories and acting and theater as I was young. And so I was in a very alternative high school, and I was an assistant in a preschool. And one day, I was a very active recess teacher. So we were playing tag, only I was chasing the kids and they were going, nah, 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 you can't get me. I really hate that. So I said, if you want me to chase you, say, iggledy biggledy boo. So these little kids are running around going, piggly, fliggly, wiggly, wiggly. And finally I was tired. And in self-defense, literally, I said, okay, sit down. I'll tell you a story. And out of my mouth comes, once there was an iggledy biggledy boo that lived in Zambadoodle. And I just started telling this story about this magical land called Zambadoodle and this whole character and all these things. And they were just entranced. The next day, can you tell us another story about that place? And the next day, and the next day, and the wildest boys who would never sit still for anything, they would sit with me for as long as I would tell that story. And thousands of children later, thousands of schools, hundreds of schools later, the Zambadoodle took on really, it's a whole world where the grass is purple, the sky is yellow, the sun is blue. And what was so fascinating, Lorraine, is when I, many years later, went back and looked at what came out of me in the story that eventually became kind of set, is the children went through a cave, came out in this world, the cave disappeared, right? So they go in this, like I realized you could analyze the story. I've never thought of that when I was making it up. And in order to get home, they have to stand over this pink lake that is the lake of the Orah. I didn't even know what an Orah was. And I didn't even know that in Hebrew, I'm Jewish and I've now lived in Israel, that Or in Hebrew means light. I did not know any of that. So she's called the Orah, and you know how they get home? They have to jump off the cliff, imagine where they want to go, believe they can get there, and the lake will send them there. So it was really fascinating to look back at this. And often we have these gifts, and I was blessed to be able to do and create my work to be in that gifted area pretty much all my life. And now I think of it as I went into all the public schools for many years as, infiltrating, because I brought in this realm of mystical imagination. And because it was a pretend story, they let me, right? And and eventually in university, I wrote my undergraduate thesis on the importance of imagination in learning. And that is still one of my passions, is how we need to get our imaginations back. So that's the start of the story.
I love that. And that isn't that magical how even back then, the things that you were embedding in your story, you were, weren't consciously aware of where they were coming from, but they were coming through and having that impact.
Yeah.
Oh, so I would love to talk to you a little bit about, obviously the title of the summit is The Expansion. And what I would really love to talk to you about is obviously where you work is with soul stories. So before we get into how does that fit into the expansion, I want to know, what is a soul story?
So in a certain way, there's no such thing as a soul story. In a way, a soul story is really tapping into your soul and then telling some stories from where you are emanating. Because part of the problem is that unfortunately, most people, when you went through school, you were trained out of trusting your inner self. You were trained, mostly in school, we were trained to get the right answer, to comply, and to do what you're told, not to trust your intuition, not to trust that beautiful, shiny soul. When a child's really little, they just do the coolest thing ever, whatever it is. And then they go into school and they're told, stop doing that, stop doing that, stop doing that. You're endlessly being told to stop doing that. So you lose your connection, right? Because it's trained out of you. And so what happens is you don't have access into hearing what your soul is. And I'm a very faithful person. I've always believed in God. I grew up Jewish, and the whole Jewish story, how I left it and came back and lived in Israel and reclaimed God and Judaism after leaving it and the guru journey for a little bit, until I finally found a rabbi spiritual teacher who put God and Judaism together for me. But I always believed in God, and I always knew things. All right. And many women I work with who have that experience. And so when you feel that you're connected to your higher guidance, to your intuition, part of this concept of expansion for me is expanding into higher consciousness, right? So you can become more expanded in who you are and what you do, but there's also an expansion into how do you know something? Like, where are you getting what you're knowing from? And so all my work is based on a guided process. Everyone who works with me, every time, and in fact, we're going to do it in this interview, every time I make everybody stop and breathe and go into that other realm. Because that's what we've been separated from. We've been pushed into the outer realm to just comply, obey, like respond to everything outer. And if you don't do something like this summit and a lot of the work that the experts on this summit do, if you don't do that work, you just don't have access, right? You don't have access. So your soul story is your authentic self. Martha Beck, I'm reading a book by her. She calls it your essential self. She calls what I call your soul, she calls it your essential self, as opposed to your social self. So you have that outer function, and you have your essential inner true essence, but you've got to figure out how to hear it, how to know about it. And so for me, the word soul is the one I like to use for that. And I really believe that we all come in with a soul that is pure and bright and good, and nothing ever changes that. I like to say, my technical term, you get gunk on it. As you go through life.
Yeah.
And you can clean off the gunk. You can use the diamond metaphor. It's there, it's pure, but you have to dig it up, right? You have to go deep, you have to dig it up, and there's gunk on it. You've got to clean it and polish it and, shape it. So I think that is this sense that so much of what we're doing, like you talk about that inner awakening, we have to go into that deep place to open up to that expanded realm. And this is what I believe is going to change and heal our world. Like I also host these telesummits, and my next one is going to be after yours in November. And this time I'm calling it Soul Hunger. Because I really had this moment, my husband and I, where we went, there really is a hunger, a famine in the land, but not for food or water. It's for spiritual nourishment. Right. And so that's what you're all about. Your whole summit is all about that. And we are feeling really called, I think, to speak about this, to come, I call it to come out of hiding and dare to be seen for who you really are. Like that is a big part of the work I do. And that who you really are is your soul story. That you came here to, that you came into the purpose you came into this world to fulfill.
I love that. And when you talk about it, because I have a strong belief that the seeds, so I talk about it in terms of the seeds of greatness are already inside of you. And that seed is that soul. And I think it's very easy, and everyone watching this is going to see the common themes throughout the summit, is that this external expansion, it has to start from within. Everything that we create in our outer world starts from this really deeply and truly connecting with this soul, this self, this true essential self, this soul piece, and understanding who we are, because we can't show up as our biggest and brightest and most potent self in this world if we don't know who she is and we don't know how to access her. So in terms of this beautiful, deep soul work, then, what kind of, how do you do that? How do you have this kind of, I know you said you have these guided processes, and we're gonna experience one in a little while, but if somebody's coming to you and they want to change something, or as with the theme of this summit, this expansion and unleashing your potential, where do they even start? What is step one?
Okay, so I call the process that everyone who works with me goes through, no matter whether they're in my year program, in an 8-week course, privately, they all go through what I call shift, shape, and share. I do love alliteration, but this one really, when this came to me, I was like, oh yes, this is so true. And I'll tell you why. The first place you have to start, even to sign up for something, is you've got to shift out of your old story of limitation. You have to be able to shift out of where you're stuck. If you can't get a little bit of a shift, you're not going to invest the time, the money, the energy. You're not going to be able to take that next step. And I always say it's really important to develop a very big shift bag of tools. You need your tools to shift. What do you do to shift? I go outside and walk in the forest often, or sometimes you can go in and get quiet. Sometimes you can call a friend, you can read a book. You have to have the tools to shift out of where you get stuck. And then once you do that, once you shift, then you can become more open to what I call shape. And the shaping of something is kind of 2 stages. One, it's getting into the flow where this is why I do the deep guided work, to ask for those images, metaphors, messages that come not from your try harder mind. You have to be able to access this other knowing that's available to you, but you can't get it by trying harder to think about it more.
Nice.
I rescue a lot of people from what I call the spin cycle. I'm really working on this, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking about it, and all they are is in their living room alone.
Yeah.
And no one knows. It's not coming out. And so part of this shaping it is being around other people where you are safe to start to speak of this deep, true soul self that is true, but you probably got slammed somewhere in your life for trying to be your authentic self. And so you come into a group where you are welcomed and people are aligned and they feel like you have a new tribe. And the shaping of it is as you start to get these pure downloads. And I'll tell you something I tell everybody: if you get one of these downloads, if you're honest, you love it, right? If you get one of those downloads, you love it, right? But here's the kicker. Most of us, when we get one of those, we love it. We know it's amazing, but we don't think anyone else will, because we tried to share that stuff with the wrong people. Often when we were growing up, the people we were around were not the right people to hear those deep, intuitive messages. And so what happens is that then they just don't tell anybody. And here's a tip that everyone, if you're in a tribe of aligned people who really get you and you like get them, like in this summit, here's how you know. If something moves you, it will move your tribe. If it moves you, it will move your tribe. So that's the start. You trust that and you start to shape it into something you can share. Because if, say, you have this river of flow, if you don't have a cup, you can't share it with anybody. You have to shape some form of this creative flow in order to share it with someone, which is why the last stage is share, where I force the women in my world to come out of hiding and dare to be seen by putting them on my summit. I make them be the featured speakers along with these internationally well-known experts who've been at it way longer than my new people. And it's because I believe that what we have to say matters, and how long you've been saying it in this domain doesn't make what you have to say more or less valuable. And we have to come out of hiding and dare to be seen. Like, that is a big part of the in-story work, is you go in, it's called in-story. In-story way, you go in to this place we've been talking about, that's your soul, and then you have to find a way to shape it and share it, which is always going to include your story. And then you have to do it your way. We have spent way too much of our lives doing everything everybody else's way, and we are over it. Can I just say?
Yes, we are so over it. And I love this, because I think this is what's so beautiful and juicy about this is, I was talking to somebody just earlier today about one of the main things that comes up often when I'm working with clients is not feeling seen and not feeling heard. But in my experience, the not feeling heard starts from not listening to ourselves. And the process of what you do with people when you're going through this in-story piece and you're getting that introspective process, looking inside, is that when we start to honor that time, to create space to do that inner work, to listen to that inner story, that's where everything then kind of like, it's like a snowball effect, because then we feel seen and we feel heard and we feel valued. And then it feels much, not, I'm going to say not easy, because there's going to be a lot of people out here who are like, it terrifies me to be visible. But it does become easier if first and foremost, you believe in yourself and your story. Because without that,
right,
of course, you're going to compare yourself or judge yourself against others. So, okay. So I know we want to talk about, I know we had a brief chat earlier about metaphors, because you said we were talking about what is the power of metaphors and how can it help us connect to our true selves. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
And how about, instead of telling you, how about we do the guided process and then we'll talk about it?
Yes, that sounds delicious. Let's do that.
All right. So, because I'll just say a couple things about it first, and then we'll do it, which is, in a lot of ways, metaphor and image is the language of the soul. And part of what's brilliant about it is that you can get a message in a metaphor and image before your ego, critical, resistant mind gets hold of it. And you'll see that's part of this process. It's the super simple but powerful way to access this other way of knowing things. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do my in-story way guided process. It has the acronym STATE, which I just love that it turns out to have that acronym. And it is a very short guided process. All you have to do is follow along. And we use this in lots of ways. Today, we're going to use it to gather something. You can use it to clear something. You can use it to get a story. We're going to use it with image and metaphor. And when you use this, you always will have access to knowing something, like to finding out something. It gives you a very easy access point to this other realm. And image and metaphor, as you'll see, is one of the ways that makes it much easier to access these higher guidance messages. So let's start. Go ahead and close your eyes and just begin to notice your breath coming in and out. And really allow yourself to feel that shift to stillness. And feel a sense of breathing bigger than your physical self. And then allow your awareness to shift to that flow from above and feel your connection to God, to Source, the universe, and feel that pure light from above coming down to the top of your head, filling your whole body, your whole being with light, love, healing, blessing, guidance, clarity, down through your feet into the earth, grounding you in the earth. And breathe up that solid, rooted, comforting energy of the earth into the center of your being. And be aware of being in that state of connected flow. This is always the first step of the in-story guided process. This is the S of the word state, stop and breathe. This state of connected flow is the first essential step always to entering into these other realms and accessing this other kind of consciousness. The second step is kind of unique to my process. You stay with your eyes closed in this state of connected flow, but each time this step is called think about it, and you can use this step for all different things. Sometimes we'll use it to think about what's in the way, and then it's a clearing. Today, I want you to think about what you are so deeply grateful for. Think of your blessings. What are your gifts? What are you good at? What do you love? Just take a moment and let the positive side have its turn. No criticism, no judgments, just appreciation and deep gratitude. Whatever else there is in your life, feel grateful for the blessings. And take a moment and feel, what are you good at? What are your gifts? And be so thankful for those. Gratitude is really the way in to let your positive voice have its say. You can be in very deep, humble gratitude for your beautiful gifts. And let those be in the front of your consciousness. And now the next two steps always go together, are ask and trust. So I want you to ask, what is an image or a metaphor for who I am, what I do in the world, for my gifts, my unique essence? What's an image or metaphor that's just right for me in this moment? And the key is you trust the first thing you get, no matter what it is. Like if you went through, oh no, not that, not that, not that, you've got to go back to the very first thing, no matter what it is. So you go back, you trust the very first thing you get, no matter what. And this is part of how you access soul language, soul messages before your ego mind gets hold of you. So trust the first thing you get. The last step is explain, interpret. You associate to it. How am I like this image? How is it like me? What does it seem to be about? If it's something that's very beautiful, then you breathe it in and you trust it. And if you're mystified, like if sometimes you get something, you don't know what it means, you then take ask and trust and you apply it again. You ask, what is the message? What's the meaning? What am I supposed to see? Is there something else for me to hear, see, feel, know? And then you trust the first thing you get. You always ask and trust the first thing you get. So just take a moment and trust whatever you get. Feel it, breathe it in, receive what has come to you. And now just receive that, feel it, take it in, and then begin to breathe yourself back into this moment. Begin to breathe yourself back into your body, your chair, wiggle your fingers. Begin to breathe yourself back. And as Lorraine breathes herself back into her host mode after this, everybody watching, take a moment, and you can even pause the video if you want and write down what you got. And just write down your image, what came to you about it. And as part of the summit, we're going to share, Lorraine's going to share what she got, and then you'll have a chance if you want to share with me and with Lorraine and others. The summit will have a little Facebook group, and you'll have access to me through my free gift, which we'll talk about later, so that you can share what you got. right? Because we're coming out of hiding, right? And we're expanding to be seen. So what was your image, Lorraine?
Oh, so this is beautiful, and actually it's very, very relevant and very current. And what I want to share before I kind of tell you what it is that I've been getting this image every day for the last 5 or 6 days. So it's
Wow.
really interesting that it's dropped in, but more what I would say more concretely. Like before, it felt very far away, and now it feels like here. So
Wow.
I've been getting the image of like spread wings, like wings physically coming out of my back and
Wow.
like spreading out. And with the wings comes bright purple light, and
Wow.
like this it's really like really bright, but I don't know how to describe it. It's really bright, but it's also got a depth to it. And what's really powerful for me is this is the same color that I get when I have like receive Reiki. So when I do Reiki treatment, it's the same light I get. It's usually purple, and it's usually like surrounding me. But this time, instead of it being like over here or someone else, it's part of my light and my energy, which I think is really, really really, really, really powerful. And the other pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that kind of fell in for me were around my healing slash psychic abilities, which is still something that I'm relatively new to, but it feels like now I'm being called to lean into that, right? To lean into that power that has been untapped.
Wow. And it's so beautiful, because what I always tell people, what you get in this work, it's always true. It's always true. We're not dealing with real in the science sense. It's always true. And it's so powerful, because that message to you is also for you. And whenever I do this for a host of a summit, what they get holds the energy of the whole summit. So your summit's called expansion, and wings are a metaphor for expansion, right? Because your wings empower you to be more expanded, to go farther, to lift up higher. They're such a powerful metaphor for transformation and for elevation and expansion. And then same with the light. Like when you said that, I felt like that's the light that this whole summit is being enveloped in, and that everyone in it is actually receiving that expansion themselves just by being a participant in this energy, right? And so what you'll see when you get an image or a metaphor is that it often will confirm a very deep truth. Like you who are holding this, leading this summit called expansion, it's also your expansion that your image is for you personally, both in the wings and in the light. And it's also a symbol and a metaphor for the energy of the whole summit. Right. So everybody when you're watching this, trust what you got, write it down, and feel free to share it in the Facebook group, to reach out to us, to share with us, because you'll find that when you share something like this with somebody who really is resonant, it then expands. Like often in my group, when people get images, we all get something from each other's images.
Yeah.
Right. And then you can turn these things into what you create. And it's also how when you feel those wings and that light, don't you feel yourself more expanded? Like just feel that.
Yeah, it's like I can literally feel my energy field, like I can feel the whole, each layer just expanding away from me. And right. It's powerful.
Right.
So
and
powerful.
So this is what I mean by, you cannot create this by thinking about it. Without doing this kind of work, you cannot shift into this more expanded state. You can have expanded thought. It's not that you can't, but to energetically expand, you can't just use ordinary thought.
100%.
Right?
100%.
So this is just my tool. Like there are many tools for doing this, but this tool, this came to me, it's so aligned with my whole commitment to imagination, and I have a whole thing I do with what I call spiritual imagination. And when you combine the spiritual and the imaginative together, it's very, very powerful. So you become able to both create something, but also to get clear on what you want to do next, get the clarity and the confidence for what's next. Like a lot of the women I work with, like me, are older, and we have this brightness and this opportunity, right? Like my children are not in my home with me anymore. They're off growing up doing other stuff. So like I'm like, look around, whoa, there's no children, and even my grandson are there out too. So a lot of times there's this opportunity that I call in the time that comes after. So for a lot of women, there's this time that comes after you've launched everybody else out for their vision, or after, unfortunately, a divorce, or after being widowed, or even after caregiving parents to the next realm. And all of a sudden, there's just this opening for you to finally do you, for it to be finally your turn. So that is one of the things that I find is amazing. And the other thing I'll say is this happens both to women who are working in jobs and women who are retired. Like you can, like I have one woman now, she's been with me for a few years and she's in my leadership team. She works full-time as a receptionist in an accounting firm, but she's an artist. So after a few, she went, I'm bringing something to my firm. So she created an art installation of workers in the accounting firm who are also artists, and they had an art exhibit in the building of their accounting firm, right? So she realized, I don't have to quit my job. I can bring my soul calling to where I am.
Oh, yes, because that's so powerful, because I know that so many people on here will be able to relate. So often we think of that soul, like I've got to get over there, I've got to kind of get from here to there, but the reality is it's already in here, and we can bring it out in our current situation. I love that. That's powerful.
Yeah it's very powerful. For her, it was really such an awakening, because she couldn't quit her job because her husband was doing his deep work at the time, so she needed to stay there. And she came on my summit. She created these guided processes that she didn't even know she could create. So she did, and she's now in her art's in a gallery. She's out becoming a board member of that gallery, but she never thought about bringing it to her job. She kept thinking, I need to leave my job. And now she might still someday leave her job, but she also now brought art installations there, and now they can bring an art installation into a hospital. Like there's this shift, like the paradigm shift can happen where you realize, oh, I'm not limited by this old thing I thought I couldn't do. Right? Like there's something more is possible. And that is such an exciting thing. And when you have that support, and when you come from that deep place, things look different. If things that seemed impossible start to become possible. And so I'm kind of a big nudge to make women talk. I just did a recital. I did an 8-week program. It was a brand new thing. And I said, okay, we're not doing a summit. We're going to do a recital. So we literally did a storytelling recital, which was all of the 14 people in the course, they all did 10 minutes. I invited my whole list to come, and anyone could come and watch. And they each created 10 minutes that they had to work. They really worked on it. And it pushed them to tell their stories and not hide. And and I said, this is another tip, like if you're a real introvert and it's really hard, so then write down what you're going to talk about. Write it down, right? And so but once you connect to the value of what you have to say, you can do the work to become able to say it.
There was something that you were just saying, was this piece around, there's a couple of things I'd love to like pull out of what we were just talking about, because the first thing was for me is that earlier on when we went into the the guided process, you know, you were talking about the fact that our brain can't solve these things, you know, like we have to kind of, it's like, you know, actually taking the brain out and going inside of us. And what I think what was so interesting about what you were sharing about your client who's an artist is that our logical brain, there's no way our logical brain would come up with, I can just, you know, create an art exhibit at my existing workplace. Like, your logical brain is just not going to draw that kind of conclusion.
Right.
And I think when we talk about things like when we talk about like our goals and what we want to be and how we want to show up in the world and stuff, it's that there's that piece of the jigsaw puzzle which is like, actually, we don't have to know how it all plays out. We can know what we love, and we can know what we're passionate about, and we can be really excited and inspired by something, but allowing it to unfold once we know what it is, and we've created space for that to
Right.
kind of come out and be created in the world. So I love that, because that was just such a beautiful way of showing how something can manifest in a way that you would
Right.
not, your logical brain couldn't create it.
Right.
And what I loved also there was when you were talking about, you know, you kind of like, you were like, yeah, I pushed them, like it's getting that uncomfortableness. And I often talk about getting comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Because the reality is, you know, when somebody's coming and watching something like this and they're like, I want to expand, like, I know there's something more inside of me, I'm made for more, I have a bigger purpose, I have a bigger calling, I'm here to make more impact. There's this piece where any of the work you're doing, the inner work, there's going to be things that we're going to need to do where we're going to have to lean into our edges.
Yeah.
And we're going to go, oh, that's really uncomfortable, or I've never done that before, that doesn't, like, it feels a bit icky. But when you are supported, and you highlighted this really beautifully earlier as well, when you are being held and supported by somebody who's going to guide you through that process, and who you know has got your back and is also believes in you, has such belief in your potential and everything that is here for you to claim, you are able to kind of take that next step, to be able to kind of to lean in and go, oh, well, I've never spoken on something like this before, but I'm doing it, right? And I look at this, and, you know, people often say to me, oh, you're so confident, you're so outgoing. I said, yes, but that's taken 11 years of leaning into my edges, right? To create this summit, because it's those little baby steps. Because you can do that, you can do this inner piece, you can get really connected with your inner story, and then it's going, right, okay, now taking what I've learned, how can I bring that out into the world, like taking that next step. And I love that you facilitate that for your clients, because that is the action piece, is where the courage and the confidence comes from.
Right. It's so true. I'll give you another really different example. I had a woman a few years ago who came into my program, and she was retired and very active in her community. And she grew up as a Baptist, and they were a Baptist family, but she had been for a long time writing a goddess journal, but she couldn't tell anybody in her Baptist world. And when she saw me, she's like, ooh. And it was so scary for her to sign up for my in-store year, because it was like completely out of her paradigm. But she was so compelled, because she knew this was like her deep God work, but it wasn't in the language that she'd grown up with. So she bravely joined my in-store year. And on the first summit, she did a PDF, like no email sign up, nothing, just a PDF of her goddess journal. But the only people getting it were people who signed up for my summit. And then she sent it privately to a few of her women friends, and they loved it. And the people on my summit loved it. So the second time she was on my show, she had a blog, which you could actually subscribe to. And that was an ongoing blog on all of her women's spirit. And after she graduated my program, about a year later, she said, Devorah, I published a book because of the work we did, called Women's Spirit. She published a book based on that messaging that she was getting, but she couldn't develop it inside the world she was in because she didn't, it wasn't there, it wasn't for them. But it turned out there were more women than she thought who wanted to hear what she had to say, but she didn't feel safe in that environment to try it out. Right? Because when you come into my world, I like to tell people I'm deep and a little wacky and proud of it.
Yes.
Right? So it's really a world of the regular way to say that is creative and spiritual, but the women in my world are all creative, they're all spiritual, and they're all open. It's a different tribe for many women than the one they're living in. And this is the genius now of the internet. Like, you can hold this summit and all the people who sign up for it are choosing to. So all of the experts are speaking to an audience who wants to hear what they have to say. And we've got to get that old audience out of our head that didn't like what we had to say. We've got to get, I always say, you got to take that negative voice, tell it to thank you for sharing. Now shut up, get in the back seat, eat your ice cream. I'm driving. Yeah. You don't get to set the GPS or even choose the music, even though it's in the backseat going, whoa, die. You're like, eat your ice cream. I got this. So that's a big part of the work too, is to get in a community where you can try out the truth. You know, I have therapists who now bring their mystical side into their therapy, but they couldn't develop it inside that world. You know, or my therapist who published her books of poetry, and the other who's created North Star Vision. Like, you can create this authentic aspect of yourself and still do whatever it is you do in the world. And but the thing is, if you don't, it will press on you. And it's way better to say yes before you get knocked to the ground so hard that you're sick, because it does. If you have a calling on your soul, it won't let go.
It does like to give those nudges.
Mm-hmm.
I loved when you shared the story of your client who kind of gradually, it was almost like these expansions, like these steps and these processes, because I think that's something, you know, especially in today's culture where we have this kind of, you know, like instant, I want something to happen instantly, and we live in that kind of world that when we talk about something like expansion, you know, there's people like, well, like, how do I get it now? Like, and what I love to highlight from this story is that every baby step that she took was an expansion,
right?
Was her living more in alignment with her soul purpose, was her delivering her truest, most authentic message. And each time she did that, you know, she was brave. It started with being courageous enough and brave enough to take the step. And then each time she took the step, her confidence grew. It gave her the courage to take the next step. And I think, you know, for anybody listening to this, you know, Devorahs put it beautifully. Who you surround yourself with and finding the right community and tribe is fundamental to this work. But also having that moment where you go, you got to take an action step, whether it is starting a program and going, right, Devorah, help me, I want to get started. Whether it is, you know, taking the first step in and of yourself, like whatever it is, it's saying, I'm gonna take this first step because I know that otherwise, as you said, like that soul purpose is not gonna give up on you. It's just gonna keep pushing until you have to listen to it. So I would much rather that everyone takes the intuitive nudges and moves than waits till it gets to that kind of breaking point. But oh my goodness, I've so enjoyed us going really deep on everything that it is you do. And you know, before we just wrap up, I just wanted to give you the opportunity, you know, is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners / watchers with in terms of a message that you want to share before we finish off today?
Trust the fact that you're here in this moment. Like, you're here in this moment. Like, you probably can hardly believe you're here in this moment. Like, trust the moment. Really trust that something bigger is happening, something bigger is calling us forward, and say yes. say yes to that calling of your soul and trust that what you have to say matters. Right. And say yes. Somebody on this show is going to light up your world, and you're going to say yes. I often joke with my clients, say, okay, say yes, Devorah. Yes, I will. I'm always saying you're going to do it your way. If someone says, I don't want to do that, I'm saying, okay, you don't have to. So it's a combination of really saying yes, like what Lorraine is saying, to something that is calling you, even though it's scary, but also being able to say no to the old patterns. And so that's kind of what I would say, and is trusting this moment.
That is so beautiful. So I want to say a huge, massive thank you, Devorah, for your time, your energy, like your boundless wisdom. I know that I have really enjoyed our conversation today, and I know there's going to be so many people watching this that gain so much from having heard about you and everything that you do. The next step, obviously, for everybody watching, all of the details about how you can contact Devorah and how you can go and play in her world. It's the term I love to use. Go play in her world. All of those details are attached with the video. But Devorah, where's the best place to come and find you?
So first, I just want to say that the free gift, right, will just be a link on your page. And I created a free gift that really has the concept of expansion in it. It's 2 short guided process videos that when you watch them are going to literally lead you up. And one of them is even about flying, which is like so amazing from your image. So one is flying, one is like a coiled spring. It's called Metaphor, Magic, and Mastery. And this is the start. And you'll have an opportunity. I have a gift for everybody that will come after that. That's what I call a soul story session, which is where you can ask me, what the heck do I do with all of this? So the first thing to do is to just get that free gift and listen to those and see what happens. And then you can always find a bunch more things at devorahspilman.com at my website. There's all kinds of adventures to be found there as well.
That's amazing. That is, and the free gifts sound so incredible. Oh, I need to sign up and get that. So thank you so much for your time and energy today, Devorah. Thank you, everybody, for sharing this space with us and for coming and co-creating this beautiful energy. And I look forward to speaking to you all again really soon. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.